Me encuentro en el Mastercard Payment Summit todavía y estoy con Zahir Khoja. Él es el Mastercard Global VP Senior de Desarrollo de Productos y Aceptación e Innovación y para mí es un gran honor tenerlo aquí. Thank you so much for this interview.
My pleasure.
We have seen a keynote here where you speak about the usability and how the better practices of e-commerce. But before speaking about that, I think that probably it would be interesting to speak about the work you've done in Afghanistan, developing, I'm not sure if it's considered a developing economy, but I think that probably developing the inclusion of bank products there, that would be a real challenge.
Absolutely. So in 2008, I left Canada to move to Kabul, Afghanistan. And I joined the largest telecommunications company in the country called Roshan. Roshan is owned by the Aga Khan Development Network, and the two other shareholders are Monaco Telecom and Telia Sonera. And they approached me and asked me if I would set up a mobile money business there, because at that time, M-PESA in Kenya was starting to show a lot of strength. I knew nothing about mobile money. I definitely knew nothing about Afghanistan. And so given I've had the opportunity of being educated and experienced in Canada, I decided this was going to be my opportunity to do something different. I then moved to Afghanistan, and with the help of other partners, I actually helped to write the regulation for mobile money in that country. Mm-hmm. So the World Bank was a key partner in helping us to do that. We then took the technology that Kenya had with M-PESA and brought it into Afghanistan. And if you look at the demographics of Kenya and Afghanistan, they're very similar in population and percentage of rural and urban, as well as literacy levels, almost identical.
Sorry to interrupt you, yes. But what you mentioned in the conference that for the way they measure literacy is that they write their name and that's all, right?
Correct. And so when you look at literacy, it's important to understand literacy as we know it. And then when we talk about literacy in terms of can you read and write your name? Mm-hmm. And then there's something what we call numeric literacy. Can you look at a keypad and understand how to use it? Mm-hmm. Okay, on a mobile phone. And keep in mind, this is the days before the smartphone. Yes. So the Nokia candy bar phone was very prominent at the time. And so we embarked on this mission to create a business called M-PESA, P-A-I-S-A. And M-PESA in the local language means mobile money. Okay, PESA means money. And so we created this business, and it was for peer-to-peer remittances. And a year into the business, we realized it was not working. And so that was a big setback. And so we wanted to understand, why is it working in Kenya and why is it not working here? And we realized that culturally it didn't work, because when you borrow money in Afghanistan from somebody, the repayment of that money needs to be done in person. And then you sit down and you have a cup of tea with that person.
You mean physically?
Physically. Uh-huh. It's a respect thing. If I borrow money from you, I should have the respect to come to your home and repay you, not electronically. Electronically was viewed as impersonal.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So then what we realized, and through our multiple discussions that we had with the Minister of Interior, who was Minister Hanif Atmar at the time, was that government salaries, primarily police and National Army, were being paid by cash and delivered by road. And so what was happening is, at the end of every month, police officers, as an example, were getting paid 21 days after the payday, because it had to leave Kabul and go to the various different provinces, and it transferred hands several times.
Wow.
Okay. And as it transferred hands, there was a little bit of taking from the top. So if your salary was $100, you were receiving $70 because of the amount of people that had to be fed.
And they receive a commission.
We called it skimming or corruption. But it was accepted because it's how things always happened. So when we instituted M-PESA, $100 became $100. Police officers and government employees who were receiving this money literally came and kissed me saying, thank you, like we got a raise. And we didn't give them a raise, we just gave them what they were due. And then they would go to an agent and they would either cash out or buy stuff at that agent to satisfy their needs. And so we did that, and that didn't come without its trouble, because the middleman was now being disintermediated. The person who was taking the 30 was being disintermediated. So what we decided is we went back to the Ministry of Interior and we showed them that we were saving them upwards of 90 million US dollars a year by employing this program. Because what happened is proof of life now needed to be recorded in order to receive a payment. And there were people who were being paid who had been deceased or didn't exist. So that on its own amounted to about $90 million. We asked the government if they would invest that 90 million to enable the people that were once taking some of that $30 to become trainers for us. Because I didn't have the resources to go out and do all the training in the various different provinces. And so they invested part of that money, and the people on the ground became my trainers and my ambassadors. And that's how the business grew and took to scale. And very happy to say that the business still runs today in Afghanistan. It's still run by Roshan, the largest telco, and it's making a significant difference in the lives of these people. It's enabling them to actually be financially included. It's enabling them to move money in a country that is at war today in a safe and convenient and secure way.
Was it difficult to talk about financial matters to a population that was involved in war, on any thoughts that probably that they were not thinking about the future?
It was a difficult environment. The country at that time had been at war for almost 35 years through various different regimes. And so war was the norm. And understanding peace was not necessarily something that they even, a concept that they could come to grips with, because they've never had it, especially when you're talking to youth. If the country's been at war for 35 years, the youth are at that age. So they don't know any different. And so yes, safety and security and providing for the well-being of their family was paramount. Cash enabled that. And so teaching them about a digital technology that could enable them to get their money quicker and faster, and it's safe and secure, took some time. And that's why those ambassadors on the ground became very critical.
And cash probably means the way of how they thinking. It's like a very short-term way of making the processes.
Right. 3% of the population of Afghanistan at that time was banked. Okay.
3% of all population?
3% of the entire population was banked. Okay. So that left 97% of the population untouched. We actually created a product after we started to get some adoption, another product off of there called M-PESA. In the local language, M-PESA means mobile savings. Okay. So at the end of every month, if you put money into a bank account from your M-PESA account, your employer would match that amount. You would need to keep that money in the account for 12 months. The benefit to the bank is they now have a float that they can use for 12 months. Mm-hmm. The benefit to the employee is they get a matching of dollar for dollar up to, I think it was 5% of their total salary. Okay, so they have a savings. In the event of a natural disaster, a medical emergency or something, they have the ability to pull on something. Mm-hmm. If they wanted to pull that money in advance of the 12 months, they could. They just wouldn't get the match, yes. Right? So it became something that was valuable for the people of the country. And again, from our perspective, we wanted to ensure that financial inclusion was not just financial distribution. We enabled them to save. And by saving, you start to plant the seed to eradicate poverty over time. Generation 1 may not see it. Mm-hmm. Generation 2 hopefully will see it. And that's the idea. And so the business is still going today and doing very well.
And in terms of forensics, as you mentioned, probably for enterprises of the government, it was not easy to look at dead people or what happened to their savings. Do you think that thought or that problem was a matter, an issue in the whole process you done?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they wanted to digitization of the money had multiple effects. It moved money in a digitized way. You knew how people spent it. You know they saved it. But it also gave you data on the people. You knew their name, you knew their location, you knew their age, and you could start to do things for the country that were better, right? And so understanding when people were deceased because they were involved in the war, again, that was an important data point to understand versus believing they're alive because somebody told you they are. So it's really started to bring a lot more control into the country.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So do you think that, well, in Mexico we have another problematic, but the inclusion, it's been a problem probably for larger banks, but in terms of fintech revolution is making a success in terms of probably how they use a smartphone or how they are paying small services. So how do you think that our culture is also probably stopping or helping the development of these products?
So I think a couple of things. The evolution of the smartphone has really helped to accelerate a lot of the inclusion efforts. Fintechs investing into this space, again, is helping on the acceleration. Large corporations that are getting on board and governments that are coming on board, again, are helping on the acceleration of it. The challenge is going to be that once you distribute money electronically to a consumer who's never had a bank account, never had an electronic disbursement before, how do you ensure that they don't cash out? Because cashing out just starts the problem, but it starts it at a later point.
Yes.
And that's where growing the ecosystem becomes important. If you start to have more places that accept electronic money and understand the value of accepting electronic money, now there's less reason for me to actually go and cash my electronic money out. And so that's where the investment's going to really have to come in. As we start to look at the implementation of QR and contactless and a number of different technologies, the technology on its own is not going to solve the problem. It's the growth of the acceptance ecosystem that will enable consumers who are now receiving a financial inclusion benefit to be able to use it to buy milk, to buy bread, to pay their rent, to pay their electricity, to pay school fees, to buy daily needs in small amounts because they can't buy a bag of rice in a day. They can buy a sachet of rice. You need to be able to afford that. And that place that you're buying the sachet needs to be able to accept it. And so if we get to a place, or when we get to the place where acceptance becomes ubiquitous, that's where you win.
And that is going to be the point of accepting another way of payments like Bitcoin or whatever. They exactly need that, the acceptance.
They need to have acceptance. Without it, everybody's going to cash out. So all you're doing is moving the problem from 100% cash to what I call digital distribution, and then becoming 100% cash. You don't want that, right? You want to have the ability for them to use the digital money in various different places that matter to them. And that, when they see the value in that, that's when they'll start to use it more often.
The philosopher, that is the last question, the philosopher Sigmund Bauman talked about the liquidity of money, and I think that make it digital makes it easier to pay. Do you think that people will understand that digital money, it's not exactly the same as physical money, because probably physical money is becoming more expensive? It's when you go to the ATM. How do you think that people is going to understand that in order to be more liquidity to pay more things?
Well, when you start, somebody mentioned today that there's no cost of cash. That's actually untrue.
Yes.
There's a significant cost of cash. It's just where the cost of cash is placed. Today it's placed on the government because they have to print money, and the cost to print money is not cheap. And the technology that's required now to print money is even greater because you've got to ensure that the notes you print cannot be counterfeited. So there's technology that goes into physical money. And so somebody is absorbing that. In a digital world, the ecosystem will ensure that it's safe and secure and doesn't have fraud attached to it. From a consumer perspective, you know that $1 of digital money that you have, it's backed by physical money that sits in a bank. So it's never that there will ever be a point where your digital money is not accepted. It is equal to, the only difference is it's actually better. because the cost equation is no longer managed by one entity. It's distributed across the stakeholders, including the consumer who finds value in doing that transaction. So I am not a believer in providing free. Free has no value. Mm-hmm. But if I provide value and I'm able to charge for that value, and you are willing to pay for that value, then that's when everybody starts to win in the ecosystem.
Based on your experience as everything we've spoken here, do you have any advice on the for those who are trying to integrate more people in the financial system, in probably in a very hidden places in Mexico, based on what you've done?
So a couple of things. The first thing I would say, there is money to be made at the base of the pyramid. It is not a do not look at the base of the pyramid as a charitable giveaway. There is money to be made, but it's going to take multiple stakeholders coming together. People at the base of the pyramid have aspirations equal to what you and I have. They all have dreams, they all have hopes. And so if we give them products and solutions that enable them to aspire to getting to those hopes, those dreams, and fulfilling them, they will want to participate in there. But if we treat them like poor people, then they will always act like that. And so we need to include them. Walk a day in that person's shoes. Understand when they wake up in the morning and they go to work and they come home, all the activities that they go through. If you understand that, you can now look at it and say, where do I need to remove friction? How do I make that person's life easier? Because remember, time is a commodity.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't matter where you are on the economic spectrum. Time is a commodity. So if I can enable you to have a second more in your life and give you a better experience, you will buy it. And so understanding that is going to be is critical importance. It's easy for us all to sit here in a nice hotel in Mexico City, but go into those places and really understand that's where you'll be able to build the solution from the ground up.
Okay. Thank you so much for this amazing interview, and vamos a seguir entrevistando personas. Muchísimas gracias y sigan conectando y esperamos sus comentarios.